Well, hello, welcome to I Love Gay today. And we're in New York City and we are here with Dr. Jason Durant. How are you?
I'm doing great. Just surviving the heat, but doing great.
I know we're all much better off indoors for the week. This is the
Mm,
first heat wave of the whole year and it's a doozy out there.
And early too.
I know. But you're here you wrote a book, Boy from the North Country. And I think when you say North Country, you're speaking of upstate New York area, correct?
Uh, well, not exactly. The people from
Oh.
the North Country would think of upstate New York as downstate. This
Ah,
is the very tip of the state. Basically, Canada, north of the Adirondacks, really, is what we think of as the North Country, sort of the most remote part of the state.
exactly. Way up there, very rural.
Way.
And But yeah, you wrote a book, and it kind of ties in a lot with your practice today in New York with as a queer therapist. But I guess
Mhm.
focusing on the book. But yeah, tell us a little bit about it and what folks can expect.
So, Boy from the North Country is sort of the way I think of it is it's a self-help memoir. It's
Yeah.
written about my life story as a queer kid growing up in rural New York and, all of what that entails in terms of feeling kind of left out or left behind or just kind of fish out of water experiences
Yeah.
and a little bit of family stuff and how that contributed to my own sense of trauma, and it kind of traces my life story through learning how to love and learning how to connect to other people, and all the way through sort of finding a calling and working as a clinical psychologist and ending up in Manhattan and working almost exclusively with gay men. I do have a handful of people who don't fit that category, and I hold on to them just simply
Yeah.
because you can, I have a lot of gay men in my practice, and it's good to have other people to talk to. But that's essentially what the story is about.
Yeah. I can just imagine, even in this day and age, just kind of growing up in rural parts of this country and being even thought of as gay and the bullying and everything that you may have had to deal with. I'm sure that was part of that as well.
Things have changed so dramatically since this is really the 1980s, I guess, is what we're talking about. I graduated from high school in 1992. So
Yeah.
this was a time period where in that part of the world, it's farm country, masculinity and being able to work on the farm is was anyway, a highly prized kind of thing to be. And when you're not exactly that, you feel it everywhere. Yes, I think there was a lot of bullying, particularly for being gay, but also
Yeah.
not fitting all of the masculine stereotypes that are so important to people in an environment like that. I think I felt really more left out by that kind of thing than even just because of my sexuality, though that, they're inseparable, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because I grew up in Los Angeles and people always assume, well, that must have been much more progressive and so forth. And I always tell them, especially late 70s, early 80s, no, the bullying may not have been the same
Mhm.
as what you dealt with in one way, but it was all there.
Mhm. The small town piece of it's interesting that these things may seem counterintuitive, but on one hand, it can be very protective.
Yeah.
My mom worked at the school, so everybody knew me, and so people take care of each other. On the
Yeah.
other hand, there's a subtle kind of ostracization that's happening at the same time that you can feel, even if, as a rule, the community takes care of everybody. So
Mhm.
it may be that it appears as if you are part of everything just because the politeness and the nature of rural communities tends to be that way. But and you can feel when you're
Yeah.
not really invited to play. Kind of
Oh,
thing.
yeah. I know. But no, it was interesting also. I thought it was one of my takeaways from with your book was you focus a lot on one must take responsibility and ownership of one's own trauma. And that's a I don't know if it's a unique angle, but it's a strong angle. And I'm sure that was a big part of, you kind of coming out with this as well.
You know, it, it's interesting because everybody has and I know we're using trauma very loosely these days, but
Yeah.
everybody has something that's happened in their lives, and some of us have multiple things that happen in our lives that are layered. That, I think of it as like dings in the fender of the car.
Yeah.
And, the longer we wait for someone to come along and fix that and to make our lives be something that we imagine they could be, the longer you wait for that to happen, the harder it gets to undo all of that, or to at least
Yeah.
remake it.
Yeah.
And I think one of the important stories of the book is it's not a matter of saying something is your fault to say that it belongs to you. And I really mean sincerely that and it's not just that it belongs to you, it is you.
Yeah.
And if you can find a way to relate to those things that you maybe for the longest time saw as sources of shame or things that you would want to hide from, if you can see them as the fundamental making of your character, you can
Yeah.
change your relationship with it and make enough space so that it actually becomes something you're proud of and
Yeah.
something that you can say, I overcame this pain, and the very strength that allowed me to do it, believe it or not, came in because of the pain that I experienced.
Yeah. Well put. And that's the whole thing. It's kind of you mentioned taking away from the idea of feeling like a victim of this trauma, and that you are kind of taking ownership and being able to move past it.
I think we all have to. And
Yeah.
again, and I want to be really clear about that. There's no part of me that thinks that we have to blame ourselves by taking responsibility for it. It's more like this is yours. It was given to you probably under circumstances you wish you hadn't had happened to you. It was maybe foisted upon you or forced on you, but here it is.
Yes,
And
exactly.
the sooner you can make peace with it, the better your life can be. Just to state it again, it's more than just making peace with it. It's realizing that it's the clay that you were molded from.
Does this tie a lot in with the work you do as a psychotherapist in New York as well?
Sure does.
Yeah.
I have, as I mentioned, mostly gay men, and the range is maybe from 75 to 25. And the stories aren't that different, even though I think we talked about a little while ago that things have changed. In some ways, they haven't. The hurts feel the same.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the people describe the cuts as just as deep as they ever were, and I think that really has to do with we humans make it or break it in community with each other, and being on that outside has such a scarring effect. And so I'm not sure it matters how much what time period we're in. If you feel left behind because of your sexuality or what other people perceive as your sexuality, it's going to hurt because we're so in need of being connected to one another for our survival. It has to do with attachment theory, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. Well, this is great. And what I'm going to do is also make sure that when we post this online, that we're going to link not only to your website, but also where folks can be able to find the book and so forth, but especially on YouTube. But mostly, I'm just really glad that you were able to take a few moments of your time and kind of share a bit about not only your work, but this book as well with our audience.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this project sort of for two reasons.
Yeah.
On one hand, I think there's something unique in the story in that I tell it through the lens of a psychologist. So I have the benefit not only of my training to get to that point, but also working as a psychologist with gay men for so many years now in New York City. It was such an enormous part of my own healing process that I felt that I had an opportunity to share how I sort of moved through my trauma using mindfulness and including the men that I've loved over the years. I felt like the work as a psychologist gave me the language and the perspective to frame it in a different way. So I'm really happy to be here and happy to share this
Yeah.
story because I hope that there's people out there who get something from it.
Fantastic. I hope so too. I think they will. But
I hope so too.
again, thank you again, and look forward to seeing where all this comes together.
Thank you for having me.
So good.